Supervisor Roberts, could you try and connect, please? Supervisor Roberts, please unmute yourself. We can't hear you. We can see you talking, but we can't hear you. Give him a what? Okay. I don't know, Mary. I don't know who she's talking to or whatever, but I guess we can get started.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, what do I need to do?
Are you getting an error message?
No, but I'm getting like well, I don't look like Richard Jones. So my name isn't there or anything. So I don't know what that means.
Excuse me, guys. Okay, Mary, one more time.
What do I need to do to become an attendee?
Do you have your tablet?
Yes.
And are you able to log in to the voting system?
Oh. I'll try again. I just pressed the link that was sent to me for the
Oh.
webinar. So
Okay,
I
never
did
mind.
something wrong then.
Yeah, you don't worry about it. I'll just do your vote manually tonight. Don't stress over it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
pretty stressed enough.
Well, we're a little over, so I'll call this meeting to order. Is this on? You hear? We'll call this meeting to order. We'll have some Zoom issues here. Cassie said she was going to try to Zoom as well. She's on her way to Kentucky, but we haven't recognized her yet, so we'll start the meeting. So we're call this meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Price, would you lead us tonight? Oh, excuse me. Roll call. I'm sorry. Roll call by County Clerk. My mistake.
We have 28 present and 2 absent.
Thank you. Let's stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Price, would you lead us? Thank you. Have a seat. We're in compliance with opening meetings law.
We're in compliance, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Waymeyer. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda as printed. Who moved? Herb, seconded by Johns. Remember, we're able to do this on a tablet yet? Right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Approval of the September 13th, 2022 meeting minutes. Mr. Winnicky.
To move the approval of the September 13th, 2022 board minutes as amended on first page under the county board chair appointment. There's a reference to the Wisconsin Beaver Rail Transit Commission typo.
Thank you. Do I have a second to that? Second by Mr. Morris. Any discussion, additions, subtractions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Communications, Madam Clerk.
Okay, sorry. First thing is going to be the green treasurer's report on your desk. And then the second is the notice of public hearing for planning and zoning, which will be at 7 p.m. October 20th, right here in this building. And then just a quick, if you can try to use your tablets for making your motions and your seconds, it would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment pertaining to anything on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll proceed to special order of business. Mr. Waymire.
So everyone's favorite time of the year, the budget. And I just up front, as I bring up the presentation, you have a copy in front of you. I have also uploaded this into on your tablets. So if you want to see the full presentation, that's a little bit bigger print than you have in front of you. Just know that's there as well. As a side note, the other thing is, as you'll see the presentation going forward, you'll see multiple references to page numbers, and that's just to help you if you want to go back later in the presentation to look at items that I might bring to your attention so you can kind of reference that going forward. So I apologize. This was not what we, here we go. To start with. So up front, this has been continues to be a team effort, and we talk a lot about the budget being a team effort among the board, among the staff, department heads, etc., but also the input from the public. In some cases, we talk through how do we get input from the public. A lot of it is we rely on our planning documents. So when we start talking about the comprehensive plan, the strategic plan, open space plans, the land and water plan, a whole variety of planning processes that we've gone through over the last several years and continue to update that helps us focus the needs. We also look at things such as mandates and requirements that we have from the state of Wisconsin, from the feds, and we also refer to them as informal mandates. So when we start talking about, I always use the example parks. When we start talking about parks, in many cases, we look at our documents and priorities, we talk a lot about those informal mandates. So that's a lot of what we talk about, and you'll see it in the budget message as we talk how we set some of these priorities going forward. So I've used this a couple times the last few years, specifically starting with the Finance Committee when we go through a week of conversation. And I always like to use this part as kind of a set or reset as we look at the budget, because it's getting bigger every year. About 513 pages what Tammy told me this year. So there's a lot of good reading in there, a lot of good education, but part of it is the importance of what's behind those numbers. And the importance behind those numbers is how do we execute what we're asked to do on a daily basis by the public in a variety of over 800 different types of programs that we administer on behalf of the stakeholders of this county. And so it takes that time of how do we allocate our time, our talent, and our resources. And we just go some of these basic questions that you would go, it makes a lot of sense when we ask those questions, but it's a good reminder to talk through this process. And a lot is, why do we do the work that we do? And there's cases in point, we might not do certain kinds of work. And there's a why. Who do we serve? One presentation, we talked about the 85,000 shareholders, right? And then you expand that to be business holders and other stakeholders within the communities. It's a pretty significant group of people that we serve. How do we serve? It's the ethics, it's our ordinances, our policies, it's the manner of professionalism that we carry our day-to-day responsibilities. And how do we do it not just in terms of doing the job, but in many cases with care and compassion and moving things forward. What has changed? A lot's changed in the last 2 to 3 years. And how do we develop a budget that's ready to accept those changes going forward? Trends. We're going to talk through some trends tonight. I think many of you see those day-to-day trends that are changing every day. And sometimes that crystal ball of trends doesn't exactly tell us the way to go. An important question, what do we hope to achieve? And that's where, especially as a staff, we rely on the board to help us answer that question. What are our goals and accomplishments? And then how do we then help build a business model to carry out those day-to-day duties and responsibility. We talk about our ecosystems a lot and the challenges and opportunities that they present. And obviously, we're going through a lot of different economic impacts. So again, those are some of the things as we pause and we think about things, those are some things at the front of our mind. So budget and transition, or new normal. I started those words when I came back in 08 from Iraq, when things changed after the Great Recession. And everyone started talking about the new normal. And what I've learned since 09, when I started becoming a village administrator, not a county administrator, it's always a new normal, and it's always a budget and transition, because change is always going to happen on a day-to-day basis. And so it's no different this year. In many cases, this is a similar slide that we used last year, but talking about economics impacts. Flexibility, sustainability are some key components how we develop the budget internally, externally. You're seeing departments change, sometimes in terms of functions, in terms of things structured. In some cases, transition. We've had a lot of retirements coming up, happen and coming up. That changes how we are structured and how we operate, because we have some different philosophies and personnel. We look at trends, plans, and impacts. I talked about that a lot already, but we need to move forward with updating our strategic plan. We just got to build the capacity and time to do that, but we'd really like to get that done beginning the end of the fourth quarter, going into first and second quarter next year. And obviously, we need to look at our structures of how we operate day to day. And so again, the only thing constant is change. So this is going to be the last time I use this, because we have a lot of new board members. And I use this chart in 2020. It was published, initially I saw it on a chart from the Wisconsin Hospitals Association, but it's been used from other entities. And what I always try to point to, because this is real in terms of if you listen to the budget hearings, is this upper right corner. And it's where we're at as an ecosystem right now, and just what some of our team is working through. And it talks a lot about psychic trauma, mental illness, economic injury, burnout. I think if you ask yourself today versus even 2 years ago, we're seeing some of those relating things. And I put that out there because look at how long that curve is, both in time and duration. I also look at these in terms of these are core county functions. So I promise that's the last time I'm going to use it for those who've seen this for the last year or two. But I think it's an important message to remember. Some of the things that we do is not an instantaneous overnight flip of a switch. There's long-term durations of impacts that we make in the patient investments of things that we do today. So I put in a quick table of contents. You can see it in your book of how we break down the budget by pages. It goes through the various stages in terms of the message all the way down to our glossary. We use a lot of acronyms, especially in certain departments like human services. So if you ever want to know what some of those acronyms are, go back to that glossary. It talks a lot about what language we use on a day-to-day basis. It goes through each department, some of the general revenues and things like that. So just take your time to go through it if you're looking for specific items. And then there's farther detail in the actual table of contents. I also encourage you to look at our county profile. It has a lot of great information in there in terms of how we operate, who we are, what we look like, and some of the changes we're seeing with from a population to our EAV, et cetera. And so something that I always encourage folks to look at to tell the story about Jefferson County. I'm not going to go through every department tonight unless you all ask me to, because we did that for a week already. But what I want to make sure, especially new board members, know is you go through each department, the layout is pretty much the same to help educate and looking at the budget. So every department, you're going to see a department mission. What do they view is their values, but what is their responsibility of the programs they administer? What are some of their goals? You'll see columns in there that tie it back to some of our current strategic goals and some of our comprehensive plan agendas too. Again, trying to tie to the day-to-day functions in terms of the high-level goals that the county board has laid out. You're also going to see things called key performance indicators or program evaluation or performance measurements that talk about some of the tasks that our departments do and what they're hoping to accomplish. A series of factors influence program deliveries from this past year and going into the future. You'll see some organizational charts. So if you want to know how each department is kind of organized from the department head on down, you'll see a structure of that by function. You also see a quick financial summary. That has a roll-up of all the divisions relating to that department. For some departments, it's pretty simple. It's the same you're going to see in the detail. For a department like Human Services, it tries to summarize a lot of pages behind that with detailed budget information in one spot. So that's what that purpose is for. You're going to see some summary highlights. That might be things such as personal cost is often one of the bigger things, especially this year as we look at insurance and trying to look at the cost of living related to employees. It talks about any capital departments might be getting. We talk about the impact of property taxes, changes in staffing, full-time equivalents, and any other detailed information is behind that. One thing that you'll start to see this year in some of the departments, I'm going to pick on administration, is that you're going to see some ARPA dollars flowing in. So for administration, as an example, as we prepare for the broadband projects, it's going to flow through the administration department. So also you see this plus of about $1.2 million plus. We didn't go crazy. We're just executing the budget process, so those ARPA dollars flowing in through there to execute that project. The next few pages we'll talk through a little more detail. I'll put them up here, but these are that 10,000-foot view of the budget in a snapshot. And if you want to reference your pages so you can see the graphs a little bit easier, I encourage you to do so. So page 62, spend some time on. All in all, it's tough to see up in here. I apologize for that when I looked at it. But all in all, we add up all this column right here on the left is the total budget for the year. So on the left-hand side, for those who Budget 101, these are major functional areas of how we appropriate funds. So general fund, health department, human services, debt service, capital projects, MIS, highway, and fleet are our main funds. And what that means is important from our appropriation, because that's our legal appropriation, how we can move money around. So that's an important factor here. This column is the total amount of money that's being expended for the year. So because we're including the total courthouse project and a few other bigger projects, it's about $143 million. So it's kind of abnormal because we're such a big capital projects coming in the budget. And then all these are various other revenue sources to fill the gaps, or alternative revenue sources like sales taxes built in there. Or when we bill for insurance and human services, that's built in here as well. Then finally, this far right column is the property tax and how that's allocated. And so countywide, we're looking at a total of $33.7 million. When we include the non-countywide health department and library system, we're at $35.856 million. Below the next on that same page is a 10-year comparison of our total equalized value and a countywide tax levy and the changes to it. The big change obviously here is the additional debt, but the one thing to show you is that the mill rate is decreasing both from an operational standpoint and a debt standpoint. We'll talk through that in a little more detail. We did have a big increase in our EAV. It was almost 18% overall when you take the TID districts out. Ultimately, I came from aid. The state saw probably an average of about 14% with all the changes in property values going on. We had a net new construction of approximately 1.2%, and then we also had 3 large tax increment financing districts close. 2 in Johnson Creek, so think the Outlet Mall, think Menards, think Kohl's. That was in a tax district for the last 20 plus years. That's now being included in our tax rolls. Then we also had 1 in Whitewater close. 3 pretty significant ones. That's been incorporated into this new value that you see before you as well. So this is a chart we like to look at particularly the countywide mill rate. So our general mill rate is down 0.3033 for a total of 3.0309. And then our debt mill rate is down 0.0262 to 0.4107. So in total, our mill rate is down nearly 9% at 8.74%. The library health mill rate and the library mill rate, which are non-countywide, they are seeing a similar pattern. Just as a reminder, these are considered non-countywide because you have municipalities provide that service, so they're not double taxed. So the health department, everyone is taxed with the county outside the city of Watertown. And then same with the libraries. Majority of our communities do have a library, so they do not pay this tax. This is for the unincorporated residents using the library system within the county and outside the county as well. And again, that tax rate is down about 14%. So these are the other important streams of revenue that we look at. And some of these can be seen in our general revenue expenditure section that are right a part of the general fund. So this year we're showing about $8 million in sales tax. This past year we're at 7.3, but we're going to be closer to 8 million when 2022 closes out. So in some ways we're a little more aggressive, but we're still continuing to be conservative how we show that dollar. And a lot of that is concerning of that R word. We're not sure what happens going into 2023 related to recession. And disposable income is really buying commodities is what really drives sales tax. Part of the reason we're seeing the acceleration in sales tax is because we're seeing the increased costs in products. And so it's a direct percentage based on that. So as our product costs increase, you're also seeing the increase in terms of sales tax. But we're also seeing greater shopping and discretionary income is being utilized to purchase more goods as well. So we believe it's a combination of both. But we like to hedge on not counting money that we're not sure we're going to get. And so we typically follow a process that's worked out well, utilized in the year before. There are some estimates. This could go as high as $8.6 million in 2023 for Jefferson County. We just want to be protected on that. Broward County sales tax, I've talked about this before. Last time you'll see this, but that's officially been settled. So the law is certain on county sales tax. And one thing we put in here is a policy guidance and allocation. One thing Mark and I have been talking a little bit about is looking at how we pay for our roads, which are currently tax levy, and do we start to do a little bit of a flip with sales tax? For a few reasons, but one of it is just the costs of roads are going up, and how do we keep up with those costs when we have limited growth in property tax? So something we want to talk about the Finance Committee and the rest of the board on more going into next year. Property tax, our net new construction, as I mentioned before, is about 1.21%. It's one of our larger years in terms of that gross, which is at $105 million, which nets us about $347,000 of new property tax we can capture. And then I mentioned those TID calculations of what those closed. That's an additional $310,000 that we can utilize. Both those are going to our capital expenditures that we'll talk through here in a little bit. State shared revenues will continue to stay flat at $1.177 million. We did to get our official report from DNR, so that is locked in for this year. So I'll put an asterisk next to that. You may have seen in the news, but there is a lot of conversations on both sides of the aisle, potentially of what happens for local governments and state shared revenue and potential increases. We won't know until elections are done this fall, and we won't know until the next budget is introduced what that might be and where is that going to be allocated. So we'll monitor that going forward. The other things coming to the state are staying fairly flat, specifically personal property and state aid computer exemption. If you want to know more about that, you guys can talk to Mark and he can explain the different laws that have taken place to change that. The other thing we want to put an asterisk next to is utility tax. It's at $916,000, and this is the whole formula. We have power generation facilities within your county. It's in lieu of taxes, basically. And many of you have learned that lesson. We talked about the solar farms, the liquid natural gas facility, because they're off the property taxes. So in lieu of that, you pay a utility tax. We have not seen the utility tax for this upcoming year from those new facilities yet. We believe those will start to come online here shortly, specifically with the first solar farm that will be done here shortly. We put an asterisk there because we believe there should be a policy consideration of how those dollars flow in and how those dollars are allocated and not immediately taken into operations. We talked about potential a mix of how those funds might be used as recommendations, everything from debt reduction, increase in capital needs to operational expenditures and some other items too. So a future policy consideration we just want to put on everyone's radar. Our investment income is increasing. Our investment income and what we can invest in with the fund balance is directly tied for the most part, or direct correlation is probably a better term to use, with the federal interest rate based on what we're allowed to invest in. So obviously as that rate has gone up, many of those things like the mortgage-backed securities example are also going up. As a result, that's going to increase about $600,000 for this upcoming year. Interest on property tax, that's what we have to levy if someone's behind on taxes as a statutory requirement of 12%. This is the number we always like to see going down. That means folks are in a position they can pay their taxes and they can pay them timely. This number was much higher. I don't know, 5 years ago for those who've been in the Finance Committee. This was approaching $750,000 in some cases. So this is a positive in some ways that we have folks in a position to do that. And because you start charging 12% interest, that's pretty tough to come back from when you look at paying that up. And then finally, built into here too is a plan to assign use of fund balances. And a lot of this took place in our carryover process of this last year. One is we have assigned $2.65 million to the main courthouse sheriff jail project. That's mainly dealing with things that we will not have a 20-year life cycle. Example is audiovisual equipment. We didn't want to use debt financing for that, so we're trying to use cash for those items. We also have put in here, and we put this in the carryover, is to pay off the 2013 aid debt, general obligation debt. That's specifically for the facility you're sitting in today. It is callable basically on April 2nd of 2023. when it is callable, we have just under 2.1 million available. So this will officially end that debt. That will allow for also interest savings to everybody of over $400,000 of paying that debt off early. Part of the reason we're looking at recommending to do this is the way this debt was structured is that interest rates the last 10 years really jump closer to 4% range. And so we believe it's a fiscal prudent thing to do is pay that off and help reduce that mill rate some more. And finally, we had some other carryovers related that we showed. A lot of it primarily is helping with the health insurance surcharge we've talked a lot about, and some other costs mainly with personnel related to things. ARPA budget. So there's in the book you can learn more about the ARPA. We have a lot of the American Rescue Plan Act. I apologize. I got avoided my acronyms. But in there, you'll see the policy and resolution related to it, and you'll see some of the ongoing reports that we get to finance every month in terms of what's been committed, what's been spent, etc. So the items on the right, that 11.699 million, that is what's included in the budget for this upcoming year. So we had a total of about $16.4 million. We're showing a lot of those funds beginning to go out the door in 2023. The column on the left are some potential projects we'll be coming back to you in 2023. Specifically, we have set aside $200,000 for a potential water study. There's various staff members are working on some proposals right now that we anticipate bring to the county board in December is our schedule right now for consideration. The other thing is we have set aside some dollars for housing. We're going to talk more about some of our execution of that in terms of staffing, but specifically potentially help with tools. We have some potential partners would like to maybe look at, do we do a revolving loan fund for housing as an example that we can utilize these funds for. So that's more to come on those. Page 81 is our overall fund balance. I always tell people to look at that as being our balance sheet in many ways of how we're sitting. And so you can kind of walk. There's actually two columns if you look at it. The left column is the general fund, or everyone except the health department, and the right column is the health department. Health department is treated separately because they're a non-county-wide department for this purpose. We're close to, at the end of 2021, we're close to almost 40.5 million in our fund balance. Now, there's a variety of things that go into that, and that's when we start seeing the less. Those are basically, I'll say those things that are committed or reserved in many cases. There's terms of accounting that you'll see, such as assigned, committed, etc. Those have specific terms. But those are taken ultimately from that overall fund balance to get us what is our unassigned fund balance. So part of what we have is a requirement for a 2-month fund balance to keep liquid, and that's roughly right now $7.4 million a month. So a total of $22.2 million. And we have a goal of 3 months, which I apologize, which is at the 22.2. So per month is 7.4, the 3 months is 22.2. If you look up top, just a couple quickly, what's reserved. As an example, reserve all our vested benefits. So literally, if everyone would leave employment in Jefferson County today, there's a pot of money available to pay legal requirement vested benefits. We also reserve up top here what's called IBNR. It's incurred but not recognized potential litigation cost. This is based on an actuarial from our insurance company, and we reserve $512,000. This is potential costs that might run out as we go through litigation. This number was well over $800,000 last year. We've settled some things, or things have worked out in our favor. Page 111 talks about our contingency. We have a couple new categories in our contingency fund this year. The standards that are general contingency, we always reserve about $500,000 in case things happen. And departments can come to the finance committee, specifically ask for an allocation of a contingency. In the past, a lot of times I was focused on an air conditioning system going out and those kind of things. Or sometimes 1 year was elections, I believe. We had to do a recount. So that was a methodology to help with those things. That's the benefit contingency. This is based on a county ordinance. Basically, there's a calculation the finance department does based on who's eligible for retirement. And it's a 10% calculation. So that money is reserved in case to help smaller departments out. And then finally, the two new ones built in here is the health retirement account contingency. This is based on our move to the state plan to cover that $3,000 to $5,000 for staff. And then a market wage adjustment. We've talked a lot about staffing and where wages are heading. We know beyond what we're trying to do this current year that there's certain positions that probably need more of an adjustment than others, and that's being reserved for that purpose. And finally, if you look at page 111, that's also where we show our business revolving loan fund. That's close to $570,000 right now. So these are just other items as we talk about economic unknowns. I think for many of you, you see this day to day and hear about it from your neighbors, businesses that you try to support, the local farmers. And many things that quite honestly talk opposite. So if you start looking to the feds right now, one of their things that they're looking at is we want higher unemployment. And that's part of the reason, if you read some of the recent commentary about it, it want to drive interest rate higher. I'm not sure when we start to see higher unemployment right now, quite honestly. When you look at recently, there's a report saying if every job in Wisconsin was filled, we'd still have over 100,000 open jobs with working people, right? So I don't know when that changes and how does that affect federal policy in terms of interest rates. So something to watch, and we'll see what happens with midterm elections. So we talked a lot about these other items already, but just obviously we have elections coming up. That's going to change some impacts to us potentially. A labor market locally. Every day we're having conversations with department heads of various wages, benefits, all those kind of things, trying to recruit and retain staff. So it's an important issue that we have to look at. And obviously that R word. I think if you ask 10 economists, they're going to have different opinions of what a recession is and are we in a recession or is a greater recession coming? So ultimately, what does that mean to us as we put our budget together? I put these all together because we use the term flexibility and sustainability a lot. And what we like to try to make sure is we're positioned that we're not forced to cut programs immediately. We want to make sure our budget's in a position that when there's downturns in the economy or economic conditions, we can handle it to a certain extent. And that's a baseline is why I bring these things forward. So the department heads love when I talk insurance. But it's just something we have to have a reality because this market's changing quickly on us too. And I'm not going to go bullet point by bullet point. If you want to look at more detail in the presentation, please do. But things we're seeing more and more is just more requirements on the underwriters. There's greater risk. We are seeing what's called reinsurers leave the marketplace or charge more for their insurance. How we're set up is we self-fund up to $200,000 right now, or it comes out of the county's budget. $200,000 to approximately $1.75 million is covered by WMIC, which is a company that we're part owners of when we go through the claims process. And then anything from $1.75 million to $12 million is covered by a group of reinsurers. Basically, think catastrophic insurance if you think of the health insurance things back in the day. Those costs are getting tighter too. And a lot of it comes back to how do we train, how to bring appropriate staff on, and just whatever our policies look like. We talked a lot about cybersecurity in the past, and a lot of gear towards cybersecurity might not be insurance related because that's going to be tough to keep. But in many cases, it's going to really be how you become proactive. So I know everyone loves the multi-factor authentication, but right now, if you don't have that, you're not going to be covered. Right? You're quite frankly going to be at risk if something would happen. Most of this county staff computer has encryption built in there. As soon as we log in, you have to type in an encryption code, another factor that goes in there. If for some reason I would lose my computer and people's information would be lost, if we didn't have that on there, you're liable for all that, most likely with our most insurance policies right now. So those are things that we have to look at going forward. Auto is going to stay going up about 7%, which is fairly flat in the current marketplace. And then we continue to self-insure our workers' comp, but that's going to go up a little bit as well as some of the cases that we're seeing. So countywide personnel. We're going to spend a little time on this, briefly talking about the benefits, cost of living, and then eventually we're going to get to some areas related to some of the staffing recommendation changes. And so obviously the staffing markets are moving quickly. Every day we're getting new data sets or seeing what our comparable counties are doing, or even the private sector in many cases for many of our positions. So this budget includes an initial raise or cost of living adjustment of 2.5% on January 1, and it also includes an additional 1.5% mid-year. We also will maintain what we call a STEP program, which is an additional 2.5%, which the majority of our employees fall within. I already mentioned that we continue to do a market analysis. That is currently what our recruitment and retention staff member is doing right now. has done a survey that's done an initial presentation to HR committee. We'll be coming back some more recommendations how to implement potentially changes to our grade system. Last month, we talked a lot about our benefits, specifically the health insurance. Obviously, this is just a concern not only for our employees in terms of how they deal with their day-to-day lives. It's how we recruit and retain, but it's just a cost. And unfortunately, we had to make some decisions to protect the county for 2 to 3 years from now, and we started seeing cost $2 to $3 million more than we're talking about today, besides what we're going through. So we talked some about that already with our surcharge and how we're going to cover those costs that are built into the budget. One thing that I just want to put out there as we finish up 2022 going into 2023 is the employees are also having to pay a surcharge portion. That's a state law requirement, but potentially look at options to backfill that to employees depending on how the year finishes up. I'll go into the first part of 2023. We're not ready to know where that goes yet, but something I'll put all on your radar too. We're already planning for the 2024 surcharge and beyond because that'll be half of what it is this year. And then we have an institute the insurance opt-out program for employees as well. So personnel planning. This is something that's looked at every day, and you're going to have tonight in one of the resolutions, you're going to talk about a change in needs for a department that's before you in title, and you're going to see a few of those tonight as well. But part of what's in this budget is some flexibility related to some staffing. We're going through some transition in a couple departments of senior staff positions, and depending on how those roles are filled, we might need to flex staff in different roles and responsibility too. So that's partially built into this budget. We're going through environments and demands. I spent some time with the new chief and the sheriff on Monday just talking about some of the challenges we're having in law enforcement. And obviously we're not immune to what's going around, or we're not unique, but it's a countrywide problem. So how do we handle making sure we have the right folks in place to do that job on a day-to-day basis and some of the realities with that job? I think the conversation has been is we've lost some folks, and they're not necessarily leaving for other departments in many cases. They're leaving the career, and we're seeing that some other roles too, because we're starting to see people get burned out on this. Sustainable funding in our decision and recommendation. So our biggest thing as we look at staffing some of these, and there's some ARPA positions, is what happens when that funding disappears. And so in many cases, we're looking towards some natural attrition taking place for some of those roles, or in some cases, we know those positions will end when that funding ends, but just something we have to look at. It's not just, hey, we have an extra $500,000 this year, let's go add these positions, because that's a gap going into a subsequent year. And then the other thing is I just want to encourage the leadership and management training. And one thing we've continued to invest in a lot of, and you see some faces in the back of the room who are up here. We sent a lot of folks, and you look at the faces when they went through, they weren't necessarily department heads at that time or in the midst of becoming department heads, but they're now department heads. So we've taken advantage of Counties Association local government leadership training. I think most folks have gone through that. I think we have the most graduates in the state in that program. We've graduated 16 staff members through that program in the last 4 years. The most recent is Ed Reinbold in the lower left-hand corner, who's our interim economic development director. But that's 8 months of training. In many cases, it's above and beyond their normal workday. And these are folks who are self-identified or supervisors, identify them as potential leaders in our organization. And so that's why they were selected to move forward with this work. And so I think a couple of these faces you're going to see in future leadership roles who may not be there already as well. We also continue to use NACO, which is the National Association of Counties, to have online leadership training. We're up to 5 graduates of that program. And then we also have taken advantage of Waukesha County Technical College, who does a lot of leadership training. We're close to 50 there. We're also working with Madison College and some other potential professional leadership opportunities. The nice thing, the thing with Madison College we're looking at, we're thinking about the sheriffs as an example, not just focus on them, but there's potential for credits that would come with that. So as we look at the credit issue with some of our deputies, that might be an opportunity. So overall, if you look at page 94, it's our total authorization chart. So right in front of that section in your book shows all the positions by budget and what is authorized and some unique footnotes related to that. So with this budget, we'll be up to full-time staff about 572. When you add in all the county staff and taking out some of the unfunded positions and state positions, are also included in there. We're around 665 total between state and county positions doing the day-to-day work. So a couple of personnel changes. So again, on page 87, you'll see the actual chart of personnel changes, which also includes all the funding that goes with it. For the most part, our overall net change, even though we're adding quite a few positions, is around $23,000. Most of these positions have direct reimbursement of funds, but this that is on page 87 of your book. You can see that page by page. So judicial structure, there's nothing specifically in here. As you may recall, in this last year's budget, we added a judicial assistant as we began to look at some of the needs of the courts. This past year, we have started to move functions specifically related to the register and probate budget away from the specifically clerk of court to one of the court commissioners. But we're also looking at some changes to judicial rotations and how that might impact how they operate. Our economic development, there was an analytical position. We found a software system that is probably more effective and more cost effective. And so we're recommending to eliminate that position. But we're also recommending to adjust the business development position that's been in there to more of what we're calling a director of community development. And we'll talk through more of the whys behind that here in a minute. Emergency management, Donna's had a 1.4 to 1.6. We're making that 0.6 recommendation to a full 1.0. So she'll be a total of 2.0 full-time employees in emergency management. In Fair Park, we've taken on the auction court responsibilities from 4-H. And as a result, there's some additional work being there, so that's been added as a part-time auction coordinator. And then from finally highway, just some structure changes and adjustments within their structure. And then the next two slides are human services. This is where typically we see some more of the changes going forward. First, as we continue to add these programs and the number of people served is the accounting. So this would add an accounting specialist to the administration staff. And also, if you do not know, we do a lot of programming specifically for human services. They've developed, basically think of electronic medical records for human services, our staff has. And so that continues to be programmed on an ongoing basis. And with some of the needs, Human Services has identified some funds that they can get reallocated to hire on another programmer that will work under John and his team in MIS. Behavioral health, as we continue to see some of the greatest demands going forward. Specifically, we're adding various CCS positions with community support positions, some intake positions, and we're also adding a registered nurse. In the past, we've used some of the time allocated to public health and their registered nurse, but due to the demands for medically assisted treatment that is needed by our doctor, we believe it's time that we actually have a specific registered nurse in addition assigned to human services. The other thing that we are doing within this division is reassigning adult protective service staff from what was the ARDC, or the Adult Resource Disability Center, to this division. This was presented to the Finance Committee last week. Two primary reasons. One, there's opportunities for greater reimbursement with this methodology of that the Adult Protective Service can respond jointly with some of our psychotherapist positions as an example. The other thing is we're just seeing with our population greater need. A lot of alcoholism, things like that we need to have joint responses and make sure people are protected going forward. And then finally, Child and Family Division. One of the biggest things I want to highlight is what's called CLTS, and that's Child Long-Term Support. This is really helping our kids in trouble or in need of care. And based on our current workload and demand, we're recommending adding a total of 5 positions to help with that process. This is funded entirely by the state. This happened several years ago, was funding to really get kids off the wait list. And make sure they're in a position that's safe for them going forward. So that's really what the goal of this is. Capital. We'll quickly run through this. So on pages 491 to 500 of your book is the total capital areas. Specifically, pages 493 to 494 is what we're looking at for 2023. You're going to see a focus on what we term operational capital. You will not see a lot of facilities capital this upcoming year, and it's for obvious reasons. One, we spent a lot the last 2 years on the South Campus for Health and Human Services building primarily. We've done a little bit at the Fair Park going on right now, and obviously the major project of the courthouse. And then looking ahead on 495 to 500 is focused on the 5-year capital plan, things that the departments are looking at of their needs for the upcoming few years. So the number to focus in on, I apologize, it's not coming on the screen well, is this number down here. All in all, between road projects and the operational capital and the vehicles being purchased from Highway Department, and minus the large courthouse project, we're about $8.4 million in total capital expenditures this upcoming year. This chart kind of shows a breakdown by each department. In most cases, is nothing out of the ordinary that typically happen. One note that we have not changed yet, but will be changing, is Land and Water showing $120,000 for a conservation easement. That actually we've seen increased funding, and actually will be about $152,000 for that conservation easement that will be finally shown in the final budget. Land information, just one note, besides the pictometry, is a next generation 911. That is just something that's gonna, we gotta get going on, working with the dispatch center as well, but their job is to really work on the GIS data conversion. Sheriff's Department, Fair Park, a lot of these things are ongoing. One thing I do want to highlight relates to the squads for the Sheriff's Department. We've been talking the last couple of years of how to properly look at our facilities, our fleet for the Sheriff's Department. We changed our fleet management for everyone else for the most part, but the Sheriff's Department, because the amount of miles they put on the cars, but the other big factor, they put a lot of stuff inside their cars. And back in the day, they had these cars called Crown Vics, right? Nice V8 engines. I know our staff, after they got them hand-me-down, they love driving them because they kind of went fast, a couple of employees have told me. But they didn't change their model, right? So when the Sheriff's Department bought new stuff, we hand them down, they could take out the stuff that was in the vehicle and then pass it right down to the next vehicle because the specs inside the car did not change. That's not the case anymore. Feels like every 6 months, the model slightly changes, which means you can't put a cage in. You can't put the light bar in that was designed for a different model, things like that. And the cost to outfit these cars are getting between $20,000, $30,000 plus in many cases on top of the car, right? Because you have computers now, we got radar systems, we got camera systems, we got all that stuff built into there. And so what we're looking at is for 2 primary reasons, is to look at instituting a take-home squad program. Number 1 is a cost. We believe, based on our analysis working with the Sheriff's Department, the lifespan of these cars probably can extend to 6 to 7 years and not put the miles on that we're doing. When the Sheriff's Departments are done with their squads, they're pushing 175,000 to 200,000 miles in some cases. So we believe we can extend the life of those cars based on this going forward. The second issue is more of public safety, and it's really dealing with response items. As soon as they put that uniform on in the morning, they jump in that car, turn on that radio, they're ready. They're at home at night. A call comes in, we need mutual aid, we need more staffing. They can immediately get into their equipment and get moving. They don't have to come down to the city of Jefferson, pick up a different vehicle, and head back out. So we're looking at this not only from a fiscal standpoint, but also from a public safety standpoint that we think this makes sense. So next year, the big change is we're going, typically we buy 6 new squad cars a year. We're going to 10, which includes outfitting them as well. We believe after 2023, get back to the 6 vehicle rotation to keep this program going. The other big thing I want to note in here is replacement of the 911 phone system that needs to be upgraded as part of looking ahead to the next generation 911. So we will be applying for that PSAP grant. You might recall a few months ago you passed a resolution. We're the PSAP for the county, which means, and the sheriff's working on the grant right now, but that means we have one entity that can apply for those grants. So our intention is to apply for that grant to look at upgrading that phone system, which is part of this going forward. And then for the Fair Park, I just want to highlight on the far right side is just we received a $220,000 tourism grant. A portion of that's going to the activity center right now, but all these are projects that will take place next year. These don't flow through the budget, but just I'll make sure the board is aware these are additional projects I'll be beginning work on next year. Highway. This is really focused on their big trucks, and if you want to see them, just go outside here and you can kind of see some of their equipment. We operate what's called a depreciation count. In essence, it pays for itself, and that's what we try to manage, look at other products out of. But as you can see, it's a big number, but that account is set aside. We have ordered a lot of these trucks already for multiple years. The reason why is we're looking at almost 24 months lead times on many of these pieces of equipment. And so we're trying to get things in a position that we have reserved spots. The way the contract is written is we can cancel these contracts based on the current demand. Anticipation, not knowing the budget officially gets approved or not. But if we didn't lock it in, those costs would be going up. So the good thing is our fleet's in good shape, so we can take some extended time on those trucks, but that's what's built in. And finally, operational capital. So MIS, a couple of big things, just ongoing needs in terms of keeping the system and the servers continue to cost more money. Don always loves to tell me that every single day. But the one thing I do want to make sure everyone's aware of, you might ask what's a nimble at Waukesha. We have an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Waukesha that we both have remote storage sites at each of our facilities. So in essence, things that take place here and all our redundant systems here also get recorded back in Waukesha. So, and the same thing here, we got a system here for the city of Waukesha in case something happens here. When this was set up, we looked at basically potential for natural disasters such as tornadoes, get that spatial mileage in between so we don't count on everything being right in the city of Jefferson. If something would happen, we can remote in and get things up and running as quickly as possible. The fleet program is for all our vehicles except the sheriff's department and those big trucks I just talked about. We started this a few years ago, and we're looking at another $261,000 in purchases going out the door. So you might ask, what are these numbers down here below? So we just had our first big resale of vehicles from what we bought in 2020, and there's one car from 2021. So a total of 14 cars about 2+ years ago were purchased for $321,000, about $322,000. We just sold them for more money than we bought them for $330,000. So there's a lot of factors. Obviously, the demand is pretty high right now, but we have some natural advantages when we sell them on the open marketplace. We get to go on the state purchase group bid, which are very advantageous costs, and we don't pay sales tax. So when we set this program up, the intention is to reduce maintenance costs by keeping these cars moving and flipping, find the best value. So when we resell them, you see this cash neutral position almost going forward that I showed before you. So this is our first big year kind of showing that, but I think it was pretty good results of what we saw. And then finally, there's the capital products. As I mentioned, mainly not a lot of hard costs for facilities. The 4 items beneath the sheriff complex and courthouse project are just some small projects at the South Campus that we kind of reserved, wait and see what the actual cost of the final products were. And again, that's on page 492. Roads. So you'll see some better maps in your handouts. 412 talks about our overall rating system. Every year, our highway departments does a PACER rating to look at it and how we're doing. And the positive thing is our numbers continue to go up. We're above 6 is our average rating. It's probably the highest level it's been about 5 years right now, based on things that have been done and some of the philosophies that have changed. So as you look at the road system, you want green and those blue colors. Those are good. Those red and purple, not so good. But that's the basis as we build the road projects. And as you see, they all kind of line up in these nice corridor systems that the highway department has started to switch to. So 2023, this is a year of acceleration. We did get, if you did not know, we did get 2 grants through the state from the funding of the bipartisan infrastructure bill law. And those actually will get the numbers beginning part of November as we shore that up. But our plan is we'll get close to 31.5 miles of roads redone this year between the mix of mill and overlay and pulverize and new milling going forward. So the work that Jefferson County will be doing is really that work over here on County Highway Q. That's about almost 13 miles from State Highway 89 down to State Highway 19. We're projecting that to be about a $3.2 million project. And then over on the east side is the money that was funded through that bill, specifically E, down to County Highway B, and then F, going to Sullivan, and then south of Sullivan down to County Highway CI. Right now, the total amount of money for each one project is $1.79 million. The other is almost $2 million. we'll see what the quotes come in at. We have reserved about $1.9 million between two accounts as our match. $1 million in ARPA, or American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and then a STP fund within the Highway Department. It was originally $1 million, but it's a little bit less now as we're doing engineering for the county Highway D bridge projects coming from there. So we'll see what the final numbers come in, and we'll come back to you all if we need to look at it, and we'll push DOT for more money if these costs come in higher. And then obviously I already kind of talked about the funding source as we look ahead to the future to keep pace with this. Our ultimate goal, so everyone knows, as this project, 5-year project is developed, is we really go through the system every 20, 25 years. That's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to put together, that the roads are touched at least every 20, 25 years. That has not always been the case. And so some of these roads, if you look down, like, I think it's K area, we're talking 30 plus years.
Slide 35, that should, you've got $4 million. There's a typo somewhere in that.
Yeah, I missed it. It's should be 462. 402. I apologize. Thank you. And then looking ahead, here's what our projects look like for 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28. Each year, we're roughly around that $3.6 million is our intention. The one caveat I'll say is County Highway D. Those might flip around depending on when the funding is finalized for the bridge over County Highway D down here. We're kind of basically in the stages that we will get the money. We're in engineering stage for that, but we just need to finalize when that money is going to be released. I say that because that bridge will be down, and when that bridge is down, we feel that's probably the best time to do the road work at the same time, versus having the bridge down and come back a year later, then do the road work. So more to follow on that in terms of if that flips or not. And just as a reminder, talking bridges, now I saw on the way here, they changed the date on us, but officially the Main Street Bridge in Jefferson is supposed to go down on 17 October. The new message board said 24 October, so if you want to test it out that week of the 17th, if it's open or not, but just as a reminder. I don't do that as the announcement, no. All right, we're almost to the end. I was trying to keep this moving. So I brought this up before, and something sometimes I think we need to highlight better, that we have outside evidence looking at our patient investments and how we do programs to achieve better results for the ecosystem of Jefferson County. And this is just an outside objective use of data to look at it. And so officially we were ranked number 200 out of almost 3,000 counties in the United States. So top 10%, and if you actually did do the math, I think it's like 6.7%. So something we should be really proud of, but it's important because you look at the next things, there's a reason why as we look at some of our investments. And one thing I told Finance Committee when I brought this up is, note the group we're a part of. It's called the peer group, is the urban high performing. That's how we got rated. So obviously we're in this unique phase of where we're at between Madison and Milwaukee, but folks are looking at us being more urban in some cases with some of the data sets. So there's a total of 10 categories and 89 metrics. And what I show in front of you is where we're the highest level down to housing, which is our lowest level in terms of metrics, in terms of competition. But I bring this up because when we say healthiest communities, we often think of is just health department. Is it just human services? And when you look at this, it's a lot more than just those departments. It's a lot of what our departments do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's things with our land departments, it's things with law enforcement, it's things with the Corporation Council office. It's UW Extension and how we partner with schools and things like that. It's infrastructure, how we build highways. So as we look at it, these are important metrics to continue to look at in terms of those outcomes. And again, these don't change overnight. It's part of these conversations that we have on a recurring basis to make these improvements. So part of this, how do we get there? Is a comprehensive plan, a strategic plan. These are just some of our implementation strategies, but broad categories. These probably need to be updated because some have been accomplished and some might need to be rethought, quite frankly, as part of our strategic planning process going forward. And so some things that you see in the budget for this upcoming year, just want to highlight quickly, is just our broadband is moving forward. We're supposed to have some updated information when both Edge and Buck Tussle will be starting a project, but they're supposed to be 23 and 24 year projects. We also are aware TDS is going to be doing some major investments in many of our cities this upcoming year. In some cases, they're already prepping for that going forward. So some good things related to broadband. Throughout the studies that we've done, there's been a lot of conversations on public relations, strategic marketing. So we are entering into our second year of efforts with Discover Wisconsin. I'm going to show you a little plug here in a second. But our biggest thing is working to use that material in a better way that was meant to be. And that's just to really advertise the great things here in Jefferson County. Housing. I hear that almost in every meeting I go to right now. How do we deal with housing? So a couple things that we're working on. So number one, we've taken a pause of how we deal with some counseling services through the Economic Development Consortium. Part of it is trying to figure out what HUD required us to do and some issues with some rule changes. Based on some further clarification on the rules, we're going to go back to some of the counseling services that we did for down payment assistance and some rehabilitation grants that are out there. But the other thing we're also looking into is potentially foreclosure counseling and things like that as well to be preventative going forward. We're looking at partnerships, not only with our communities, but right now we're working with the Greater Watertown Health Foundation to kind of do what are some tools that work best for a county like Jefferson County, and how do we assist with what housing needs to look like across the board. We have everything from the homeless population to workforce needs to even higher end housing as well. And how do we get there? And so there's going to be more to follow on that going forward. And I talked a little bit about the change of the position in JCEDC. As many of you may know, our director moved to a different job beginning part of this year. And there was a pause of filling that role for a time because they were going through their strategic planning process with both their public and private partners. And one thing that came out of there from all the partners was really the focus on it just can't be about the traditional economic development, which is typically like, how do we attract a new business? How do we keep a current business? All is still very important. But some of the biggest drivers to the employer is, do we have employees so we can keep the business here? Which means, do we have housing? And can we attract the working age population? And so part of the goal of that strategic plan is really focused on more of the community development focused. A lot of that's related to housing. That's part of our recommendation in this budget. And then we just have a lot of other partners that kind of tie to the comprehensive plans, the strategic plan initiatives that I just want to make sure we highlight. You may have heard that the Greater Watertown Health Foundation bought the old Bethesda headquarters and all the grounds surrounding it, and they're calling it the Collective. And we've helped with a few things in there, but one thing they're letting us do is our human services will have an office up there, so we can be more aggressive in terms of crisis calls on site in the city of Watertown. As part of that, we're also looking at potentially having a youth stabilization facility on one of the old day camps, campgrounds out there that we can use to help with the underutilized resource or needed resource. In many cases across the state, there's only 3 facilities for young kids in trouble. In many cases, we've had cases where we've had to send young kids out of state. That's not good for the kids, and it's also not cheap. In many cases, some of those out-of-state placements can be up to $20,000 a month. And so those are things we're looking at, so how do we improve going forward? Human Services Department continues to improve, look at greater partnerships built on our crisis intervention, specifically with law enforcement. We have a program with Fort Atkinson, starting one in Watertown, working with the Sheriff's Department, City of Jefferson. But what that is we have specific mental health professionals who go and are embedded with our law enforcement partners to help out on calls just to be more proactive going forward. So that's something else is included in this budget. And we talked about the library partners before, some of the things they're doing with the meeting space to assist our programs, whether it's our driver's license revocation process to some of our core processes, just a great resource going forward. And so that just leads us this ongoing cycle. And we're in the phase that we really need to update the strategic plan. I said that last year, and we just ran into capacity issues, and we have a new board. And I think part of the plan thing from the executive committee that was going out is the new board should be a part of that new updated strategic planning process. So the executive committee has to hold me to the fire that we're going to start that process going into next year so we can get that done and look at some reprioritization of needs going forward. But in essence, what we're trying to do is take that 10-year comp plan and break it down into 3 to 5 year increments. And then that drives really the budget that you see before you today. And then finally, the last 2 slides talk about some miscellaneous items. So we have a couple grants there in Hopper. One is for our treatment courts. We actually just got advised late last week. We officially got our enhancements grants. We initially were getting about $174,000 to run our drug treatment and alcohol treatment courts, and it's increasing to $232,000. We're receiving the 4th highest allocation of state aid for our programs. But specifically what that money is being used for is to help some of the rising costs for our case manager workers. We contract through WCS for that work, and they're having a tough time filling those roles too. So we ask for additional funds so they can increase their wages to those employees so we can keep those folks in place. And then some other enhancements, some time, money to assist with psychotherapist time from Human Services. Specifically, we also believe we have a peer support person who has experience in this area to really focus on those who have the rural agricultural background who are struggling through drug and alcohol abuse and going through the treatment court process. So someone to specifically help with that. And then we're also changing our testing type mainly to be more effective, but also because right now we do urinalysis test. And if you only have one gender, you can't necessarily do the other gender. So we're looking at more of a neutral test so we don't have to worry about that process as we look at staffing issues. I talked through the JCEDC already in terms of what that might look like and some of the housing initiatives that we're looking at going through specifically. I talked about the water study. We do have about $200,000, and we'll bring that forward hopefully by the end of the year. Patricia has been really working hard with some other folks on the staff and moving that forward. Project carryover, we have about $100,000 in a general expenditure that we're looking to utilize this upcoming year to help some updates on our website and make it a little bit more interactive, potential work with our tourism council, and that's what we're going to utilize for our strategic planning assistance. And then I already talked about paying off that debt early. The total savings of interest will be about $436,000 long term. And then the last few things, long lead times. We've ordered some equipment early through authorization. And a great example is use the squad cards. We asked the finance committee if we could order those early. We're literally 2 days away from them ending the orders for 2023 already. So all those things are moving fast. Opioid lawsuit, we hope to come back to you with a better plan here shortly. We talked a little bit before about what's called a securitization process, which might be a greater lump sum amount of money up front, which might change how we budget and prioritize those funds coming into the door. So we want to formalize if that's a possibility or not, and that's being worked on a statewide basis right now. And we'll be back for some other options for planning. Staffing needs. You know, this is an ongoing basis. Is going to be a continued conversation. At the end of the day, we're our capital, our work being done is the folks of staff. That's 600 and some odd people on a day-to-day basis, and we're in a dogfight, right? And our surrounding counties and our cities and our private sector, they're in a dogfight to keep and recruit employees and high-quality employees too. So this is something we continue to have to be creative on. We got to continue to look at our capacity and the ability for work they do on the functionalities, focus on recruitment and retention, and some of our policies we need to get back to. And the other items I have already talked about, so I don't need to beat those up anymore. So part of this, I kind of want to leave on a fun note, hopefully. And if you haven't seen it yet, we have our first full scale video that's out there, and you can go on our website and see it along with some other shorts that are out there. But part of what Discover Wisconsin did is they made a commercial for us, a 60-second commercial that we just finally released. And I think it talks about some of the positive attributes that we have here in the greater region, because you see things that are right on the border here too that feel more part of Jefferson County. But I want to play this really quickly so we can talk about some of the great things that we have going on too.
Home was a safe, healthy, and tight-knit network of communities where the natural landscape breeds outdoor recreation and the job market is a growing influx of opportunity. Centrally located between Milwaukee and Madison and recently named one of the healthiest communities in the country, Jefferson County is the home you've been looking for. Jefferson County yields some of the top-rated public schools and higher education institutions, including Madison College, UW-Whitewater, and Maranatha Baptist University. Miles of trails connect Jefferson County towns to each other and neighboring cities. The Rock River, Rock Lake, and Lake Koshkonong are a few hotspots for paddling, fishing, and boating. progressive mindsets have curated a thriving business district that boasts top private sector employers, including Trek Bicycle, Nestle Purina, Space Saver Corporation, Fisher Barton, and Generac Power Systems, Inc. We invite you to join our Jefferson County community where outdoor recreation meets small town living.
So our goal in all that is just continue to find a way to show folks what's going on here in Jefferson County and the positives behind it. And our focus is taking pride locally, but a lot of it is also as we look at how do we attract that future workforce going forward. This is the kind of things that we're looking at trying to sell. And how do we make positive impacts of bringing those folks here too, both for work, living, but also playing, and tourism as well. So there's a lot. I know I talked a little bit fast because I'm looking at the clock and we got some more business ahead of us. But it's an important document that we do on an annual basis. And so the next slide here, we'll be handing out some budget amendment forms of memo that we'll get out to everybody tonight. So these are the next steps in the budget process. So first of all, obviously we have the introduction, and we'll post the budget online so the public can see it as well tomorrow. Basically for the next month is what we call the supervisory amendment process. And the form and the memo that we'll have for you all explains what that all is. And so on the far right is a simple example of the form. But if you seek that you want to add something to spend money on, you also have to show where you're going to take the money from. In essence, is what we ask you to do. Staff is here to help. If you have questions of what that might look like, please reach out to Mark or I specifically, or other department heads. Some things that are easier to move than others, and so that's why we have this form in place so we can do a full fiscal analysis of what the proposed changes might be. We ask that all budget amendments are due to my office on November 7th, so we can do that fiscal analysis in case some changes are taking place. We do that because sometimes you think you might be impacting one line item, and you might impact 10 as a result. Or for those who sat through the Budget 101, we had this thing called maintenance of effort. Sometimes if we do something too much, that changes what that maintenance effort might look like, and it may impact federal and state funding too based on the program type. So it's just something we have to be aware of. November 9th, the Finance Committee will have the regular Finance Committee, and any amendments will go in front of them for review and for a recommendation or a non-recommendation. As a side note, all amendments will come to the full county board on November 15th, even if it has a non-recommendations from the Finance Committee. So just so you know. So if you put one together, even the Finance Committee says 0 to 5, we should move it forward. It will still come forward to the full board. And then November 15th, you'll have the final, there's actually 2 resolutions that you'll approve. One is the overall tax levy with appropriations. The other is the 2 non-countywide tax resolutions for levy to go forward. And then any amendments will be part of that process. So, Mr. Chair, that's all I got. Open to any quick questions anyone might have.
Questions for Mr. Waymeyer? It's a lot to absorb, maybe at the next meeting.
Yep. So if you have questions on the budget hearing, obviously is also 2 weeks from tonight. That's why we're having a special meeting in October. Come and talk to us. Mark and I are now at the trailer at 302 South Center. So come on in. But we can talk through any questions you might have any of the budgets, and then obviously you have a lot of subject matter experts with the department heads as well who help you through this process. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Waymeyer. Takes us to item number, our committee reports, resolutions, ordinances. Item 10, Economic Development Consortium, resolution supporting applications United States Economic Development Administration. Mr. Zarling, could you read this, please? Present it, please. Page 3 of.
Resolution number 2022-44, supporting application to the United States Economic Development Administration for recognition of the Madison Region Economic Partnership as a federally designated economic development district. For over 50 years, the United States Economic Development Administration has partnered with distressed communities throughout the United States to foster job creation, collaboration, and regional innovation. Designation as a federally recognized economic development district by the United States Economic Development Administration will allow districts to become eligible for grants offered through the Economic Development Administration to help fulfill regional economic development strategies designed to accelerate innovation and entrepreneurship, advance regional competitiveness, create higher skill living wage jobs, generate private investment, and fortify and grow industry clusters. This resolution supports the Madison Region Economic Partnership, consisting of the counties of Columbia, Dane, Dodge, Jefferson, Rock, and Sauk, applying to the United States Economic Development Administration for designation as an economic development district. The Jefferson County Economic Development Consortium considered this resolution on September 22nd, 2022, and recommended forwarding to the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors to support the designation of the 6-county Madison Region Economic Partnership as a federally designated economic development district. Move ahead now. Therefore, let it be resolved that the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors hereby supports the designation of the 6-county Madison Region Economic Partnership comprised of Columbia, Dane, Dodge, Jefferson, Rock, and Sauk counties as a federally designated economic development district under 13 CFR 304. Fiscal note, this resolution has no immediate fiscal impact. Chairman, I move that we approve resolution number 2022 as stated.
Moved by Zarling. Do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Johns. Discussion, questions? Mr. Kennard.
I was wondering, is this the same as the ICC, the counties? Or is
No.
it one less?
No. The ICC of Jefferson that's just a group that gets together to do educational things and discuss common problems and common solutions. And Dane County is not part of ICC. Any other questions? Voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the resolution passes. Resolution 2022-45, Mr. Zarling.
Amending the intergovernmental cooperation agreement for the Jefferson County Economic Development Consortium. Executive summary, the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors approved the creation of the Jefferson County Economic Development Consortium by resolution number 2003-28 adopted June 10th, 2003. Consortium includes Jefferson County, the cities of Fort Atkinson, Jefferson, Lake Mills, Waterloo, Watertown, Whitewater, and the villages of Cambridge, Johnson Creek, and Palmyra, and is governed by an intergovernmental agreement. The County Board voted to amend the intergovernmental agreement by resolution number 2017-34, which primarily increased the per capita rate per participating community to $1.50. The organization continues to evolve to meet the needs of the greater Jefferson County region. This past year, the organization went through a strategic planning process to refine the direction and priorities of the organization. As part of this process, a key goal was to incorporate community development activities along with economic development. Associated with this process was updating the intergovernmental agreement based on the strategic plan and feedback by member communities. Key concepts in the amended intergovernmental agreement include the addition of the following community development goals: the relationship and collaboration with Thrive ED, a 501c3 public-private organization to support Jefferson County's communities, updating the membership listing to include the village of Palmyra, updating roles of the board of directors and the member appointment process, conducting meetings consistent with other county committees, adding an executive committee, providing oversight of staff sections, including types of services to be provided, and amending member withdrawal and consortium dissolution process. Jefferson County Economic Development Consortium met on September 22nd, 2022, and recommended forwarding this resolution to the county board for approval. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors hereby approves continuing the attached Jefferson County Economic Development Consortium intergovernmental cooperation agreement as amended, and authorizes the county administrator to execute the agreement on behalf of Jefferson County. Fiscal note: Jefferson County's funding obligation was approved by the county board in the 2022 budget. There is no additional fiscal impact arising from this resolution. I move to approve this resolution.
Moved by Supervisor Zarling. Do I have a second? Supervisor Gulig seconds. Questions, discussion? Voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. It is approved. Takes us to item 11, Finance Committee, resolution concerning the disallowance of claim for personal injury of Daniel Bauman. Supervisor Jones.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Resolution number 2022-46.
Yes.
A personal injury claim has been made against Jefferson County. The claim has been reviewed by the county insurance carrier, WMIC, and it was recommended for disallowance based on the finding that the county has no liability for this claim and is not legally responsible for the alleged damages. This resolution formally denies the claim filed against Jefferson County and directs the Corporation Council to give the claimant notice of disallowance. The Finance Committee considered this resolution October 6, 2022, and recommended forwarding to the County Board for approval. Fiscal note: this matter has been referred to Wisconsin Municipal Mutual Insurance Company, WMIC, and resolved in accordance with the terms of the county policy. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of this resolution.
Moved by Supervisor Jones. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Jekyll. Questions? Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Opposed? Hearing none, resolution passes. Resolution accepting grant funds from the Wisconsin Department of Military Affairs. Mr. Jones.
Resolution number 2022-47. The Wisconsin Department of Military Affairs Division of Emergency Management has awarded Jefferson County $15,210 to support the Jefferson County Hazardous Materials Emergency Preparedness Jefferson County Commodity Flow Study Project. This project will help to evaluate the safety risk, analyze trends, forecast demands for the movement of goods, and determine the needs for infrastructure. Understanding the movement of hazardous materials transported into, out of, or within Jefferson County will assist in a better understanding and respond to any type of incident. On October 6, 2022, the Finance Committee reviewed this resolution and recommended forwarding to the County Board to accept $15,210 in grant funding to identify the types and amount of hazardous material transported into, out of, or within Jefferson County. Fiscal note: these grant funds will be used for divisionary programming to identify the types and amounts of hazardous materials transported into, out of, or within Jefferson County and are available to be used until March 31, 2023. Jefferson County will receive reimbursement for costs incurred during this time. This is a budget amendment. This resolution authorizes the finance director to make the necessary budget adjustments to enact the resolution by increasing revenue and expenditure appropriations by $15,210 in the Emergency Management Department budget. County Board approval requires a 2/3 vote of the entire membership of the County Board, 20 votes of the 30-member County Board. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of this resolution.
Moved by Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Gulig. Questions? Discussion? Seeing none, this is a 2/3 vote. We'll vote on our tablets.
Supervisor Jones,
Yes.
Supervisor Roberts,
Yes.
we have 28 yes, 0 no, 2 absent.
The resolution passes. Takes us on to item 12, Human Resources Committee. Resolution creating a full-time resource conservationist position and eliminating a vacant full-time geographic information and land use specialist 3 position. Supervisor Fitzgerald.
Conservation Department currently staffs 6 full-time positions, 1 Land and Water Conservation Director, 1 Administrative Specialist 1, 2 Resource Conservationists, 1 Water Resource Management Specialist, and 1 vacant Geographic Information System GIS and Land Use Specialist 3. As many duties of the Geographic Information System and Land Use Specialist 3 position were transferred to the Geographic Information System position in the Land Information Office in 2022, the Land and Water Conservation Department Director has evaluated existing and future programs and has identified programs that cannot be absorbed by existing staff, including a new partnership with the City of Watertown to accomplish agricultural conservation practice implementation for the city to meet state permit requirements, developing flood mitigation strategies, training on invasive species management, and coordinating vegetation management plans for flood mitigation properties. In consideration that the Geographic Information System and Land Use Specialist 3 position is not qualified to perform the duties required to successfully complete these projects, the Land and Water Conservation Department Director is requesting elimination of the vacant Geographic Information System and Land Use Specialist position and the creation of a full-time resource conservationist position. The Land and Water Conservation Department Director has also determined that these existing, expanded, and new projects are compatible with the Land and Water Resources Management Plan and the Jefferson County Comprehensive Plan. The resolution creating or requesting the creation of a full-time resource conservationist position and the elimination of a vacant full-time Geographic Information System and Land Use Specialist 3 position in the Land and Water Conservation Department was reviewed by the Human Resources Committee on September 16, 2022. The Human Resources Committee recommended forwarding this resolution to the County Board to create 1 full-time resource conservationist position and eliminate the 1 full-time Geographic Information System and Land Use Specialist 3 position in the Land and Water Conservation Department. Fiscal note: the creation of the Resource Conservationist position has an annual cost of $93,340.60 for salary and fringe benefits. There is an annual savings of $98,397.60 from the elimination of the full-time Geographic Information System and Land Use Specialist 3 position. There is also a $10,808 of estimated revenues through an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Watertown in 2023 for agricultural conservation practice implementation that could assist with funding this position. Therefore, no additional tax levy is required for this position change. This is a budget amendment and requires a 2/3 vote of the entire membership of the County Board. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of this resolution.
And I have a second from Supervisor Turville Heights. Questions? Discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote.
Supervisor Jones,
Yes.
Supervisor Roberts,
Yes.
Supervisor Felker, we have 28 yes, 0 no, and 2 absent.
Resolution passes. Takes us to item 13, Land and Water Conservation Committee. Supervisor Falker. Mr. Falker, second by Meg Turville Heights. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
One opposed?
Didn't hear any of it.
You say aye, okay. The resolution passes. Resolution authorizing application implementation Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Healthy Lakes and Rivers Grant. Supervisor Falker.
Yes. Authorizing the application and implementation of Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Healthy Lakes and Rivers Grant. Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources has a grant program called Healthy Lakes and Rivers, which assists landowners with conservation practice implementation costs related to the installation of native plant shoreland gardens and rain gardens. These practices protect the quality of the lakes and the rivers. Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department applies for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources funds on behalf of property owners who want to implement these conservation practices. The Land and Water Conservation Committee considered this resolution at its September 21, 2022 meeting and recommended forwarding to the county board to authorize the Land and Water Conservation Department Director to submit a grant application and supporting documents to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for the Healthy Lakes and Rivers program. Let's see. Whereas the Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department is interested in obtaining a cost share grant from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for the purpose of implementing conservation practices within 1,000 feet of Jefferson County lakes and 300 feet of Jefferson County rivers. Whereas the Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department attests to the validity and veracity of the statements and representations contained in the grant application, and whereas a grant agreement is requested by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to carry out the project, now therefore be resolved by the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, the Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department will meet the financial obligations necessary to fulfill and satisfactorily complete the project, and hereby authorizes and empowers the Land and Water Conservation Department Director to do the following. Sign and submit a grant application supporting documents to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for financial assistance that may be available. Enter into grant agreement with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Submit quarterly and or final reports to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to satisfy the grant agreement as appropriate. Submit reimbursement request to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources no later than the date specified in the grant agreement. Be it further resolved that the Land and Water Conservation Department will comply with the local, state, and federal rules, regulations, ordinances relating to this project with cost share agreement. Physical note, the total grant request is $5,500, of which $5,000 will partially cover the cost of implementing the practices, with the landowners covering the remaining implementation costs. The remaining $500 of the grant will offset the cost of existing Land and Water Conservation Department staff who provide technical assistance for the projects. Currently, no budget adjustment is necessary to enact this resolution. The Land and Water Conservation staff will propose an adjustment to the 2023 budget based on the status of the projects after a year and as a part of the budget carryover process. Mr. Chair, I move for this resolution.
Moved by Supervisor Falker, seconded by Supervisor Christensen. Questions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Resolution passes. Takes us to item 14, Planning and Zoning Committee. Supervisor Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ordinance number 2022-12,
12.
amending Jefferson County zoning ordinance. The Department of Agricultural Trade Consumer Protection recently reviewed the Jefferson County zoning ordinance for compliance with the County Farmland Preservation Plan and Wisconsin Statute Chapter 91, Department of Agriculture. The Trade and Consumer Protection identified 4 areas of the ordinance that are required to be amended in order for the county ordinance to be certified farmland preservation zoning ordinance. The proposed changes will bring the ordinance into compliance with the Farmland Preservation Program and will allow the zoning ordinance to be a certified ordinance through the Farmland Preservation Program. A public hearing was held on the proposed amendment on September 15th, 2022, and the Planning and Zoning Committee reviewed the proposed amendment, town recommendations, and public comment on September 26th, 2022, and recommended forwarding this ordinance to the County Board of Supervisors to adopt and amend the zoning ordinance. I move for adoption of this ordinance. Fiscal note: passage of this ordinance has no immediate fiscal impact.
Motion by Supervisor Jekyll, second by Blaine Paulson. Supervisor Paulson, is there any questions, discussion? See none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Zoom ayes here yet? Opposed? See none, the ordinance is passed. Report on petitions.
Report to the honorable members of Jefferson County Board of Supervisors. Jefferson County Planning and Zoning Committee, having considered petitions to amend the official zoning map of Jefferson County, filed for public hearing held on September 15th, 2022, as required by law pursuant to Wisconsin statutes. Notice thereof having been given and being duly advised of the wishes of the town boards and persons in the areas affected, hereby makes following recommendations. Approval of petitions as listed, dated this 26th day of September 2022, Blaine Paulson, Secretary. That moves on to ordinance number 2022-13, amending the official zoning map of Jefferson County. Whereas the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors heretofore been a petition to amend the official zoning map of Jefferson County, and whereas petitions as listed were referred to the County Planning and Zoning Committee for public hearing on September 15, 2022, and whereas proposed amendments having been given due consideration by the Board of Supervisors in open session, now therefore be it ordained Jefferson County Board of Supervisors does amend the official zoning map of Jefferson County as follows. I move for passage of this ordinance.
I have a motion by Supervisor Jekyll, a second by Supervisor Paulson. Questions, discussions? Supervisor Kennard. Thank you. Duly noted. Any other questions, discussions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the ordinance passes. Takes us to public comment, item number 15. Supervisor Fitzgerald.
I promise I will keep this short. I know we're all ready to go home, but I just wanted to share a little bit of our recent trip to the Wisconsin Counties Association conference in September. A bunch of us went, as well as some other elected officials, some county staff, and I just thought it was important to at least report back to everybody what it was about. And I know some people, when the invite came from Tammy, weren't really even sure what it was. We have a lot of new supervisors, so just a little brief synopsis on what the conference is and what you could expect if you went. So because it is an election year, we were able to hear from a lot of the current candidates for state office. Ron Johnson sent a video message, but Tony Evers, Tim Michaels, Mandela Barnes, Josh Call, and Eric Toney were all in attendance and were answering questions about specific county information, just kind of their general policies. It was very informative, and I thought that was kind of neat. Then there were breakout sessions. I personally went to some on the role of county supervisors, creating relationships. I went to two that happened to do with my committee assignments, broadband and human resources. But I thought they were really wonderful. They have a lot of great speakers there who come every year. They're incredibly knowledgeable. People ask really good questions. There's just a lot of conversation going on. I also spent one of the mornings, the first morning breakfast with some supervisors from some counties up north. And I will say, having heard all their challenges, that I'm incredibly grateful to live in Jefferson County. because I was able to tell them how wonderful things are here and share all the good things we had going on, and they were not in a position to share a lot of good fiscal, especially. They have a lot of challenges that we don't face, but again, just a good conversation. And I also think one of the most important parts of it is the social time we spend in between meetings, at lunch, at breakfast, the night they had a nice dinner for us, just making those connections and relationships with people, to me is, we are sort of fun outside of, this, as you guys sort of know. So I think that's a really important part of that as well. The other counties send a lot more people than we do. We sent 4 supervisors, and out of 30, I don't think that's very much. So I guess I just wanted to kind of put it out there that I thought it was a great, event. Next year, when Tammy sends out that email and says, "Do you want to go to the Wisconsin Counties Association conference?" Think about it a little bit. Look at the email, look at what's there. If it works in your schedule, I would highly encourage anyone who wants to go, because it really is great. And I get it. I'm a teacher. I loved education. I still love learning, but I think there's just so much to know. This job is not the same year after year, right? It's different. It changes. We need to educate ourselves. So that's my little plug for the conference. You will probably hear me stand up and do this again in spring when that email comes out, because I would really like to get more people to come to the conference next year, so we can bring all that knowledge back and make Jefferson even better. So if you have any questions, you can certainly ask me. You can go on to the wisconsincounties.org is the WCA website. All the information from the conference is there. You can click on anything, see what it was about, see what's going on. Again, I just thought it was worth us chatting about it a little bit so you knew what it was all about. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fitzgerald. And the sheriff had his hand up in the back. He would like to speak, and I believe he would like to introduce his new chief deputy.
Can't hear anything.
Congratulations, Don. And I want to announce we have 2 meetings this month. Remember, October 25th is our next meeting at 7 p.m. It's the budget hearing, but we always seem to find a few more items to put on the agenda. Supervisor Waymire, anything you have to announce? Thank you. Then I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion by Mr. Jaco and a second by the House. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you all. These chairs seem to be quite